Hello, it's 3 o'clock. I think we can start with our second Marktinfo seminar on in cooperation with Wine Intelligence. Today we'll talk about the Canadian market. We started a month ago with the US market, and this is our second session now. My name is Michael Schemmer. I'm the marketing manager for the Canadian and the British market at the Wine Institute. And I'll be joined today by 3 of our speakers who are market experts. So we'll start with Tina Fruth from Wine Intelligence, who will give us some insights, new consumer research data on the Canadian market. Then we'll continue with Ted Kalabukis, who's the head of our Wines of Germany office in Canada, who will tell us a little bit about the structure of the market, how the different provinces work, and tell us a little bit about the events that we are doing there. And last but not least, we have Margaret Hobbs, who is a market expert, and she will tell us something about, or give us some practical advices, especially on working in the Ontario market. If you have any questions, you can use the chat function, and after each presentation, we will try to answer all of your questions. If there's anything we can't answer immediately, then we'll certainly get back to you. And one more thing I want to mention is that you can get all the presentations afterwards, so all the participants will get an email probably tomorrow with all the presentations, so we have all the detailed information and you don't need to make any notes. So then I would think we can start. Tina, if you are ready.
I am ready if I am able to unmute myself. So I'm gonna share my screen. Hello, everyone. And I apologize because I'm going to turn this way towards my screen. I'm not ignoring you. I'm just trying to, at the same time, look at what I'm actually talking about. So welcome also from Wine Intelligence. And I'm here to just give you a few main insights into the Canadian market from a wine consumer perspective and the main trends that we're seeing in the market currently. So what we're just gonna talk about today is 6 main market trends that we're seeing in Canada. And these are all from our current reports, such as the General Canada Wine Landscapes report, but also our specialist reports about e-commerce and solar, which are available to everyone. And just to start, I'm gonna start straight away to not waste any time. The first trend I want to talk about today is how Canada positions in the global wine world. And we see it in the top 10 of all wine markets. So in detail, that means that we, in terms of market attractiveness, Canada ranks 10th amongst the 50 markets that we're actually testing in our wine market attractiveness model. This year, we've obviously included the pandemic and the COVID as a factor, which has well, shaken the world a little bit and moved the wine markets around as well. But we classify Canada as an established market, so a market that has historically grown strongly and is now starting to level off a little bit and slow the growth down when it is kind of approaching this more mature stage in the wine world. There's other markets in this category are, for example, the United States, which is actually in our model the most attractive wine market at the moment, Ireland, Japan, and other growing markets, whilst more mature markets are Germany, UK, France, and some others that you can see in this on this slide. So 10th is actually a very good position when we think about the number of markets that we're testing, and that sees that there's still opportunity for growth, but also it is not in this kind of very, very strongly growing category anymore. And then the second trend that I want to share with you today is that we always think there's such a big difference between English and French-speaking wine drinkers in Canada. And we actually, when you look at our data, you see that these differences from a consumer perspective are actually not as big as we would expect or as we would think. So when we look at it from a demographic point of view, so the demographics of Canadian regular wine drinkers, we see that there's not much change. So on this slide, whatever is dark blue is actually not significantly different. And only if there's a light blue or a red number, there is some statistically significantly different data. So consumption average of wine per month is actually almost identical in English-speaking Canada and in Quebec, which we in our data see as French-speaking Canada. And also there's no huge difference to all Canadian regular wine drinkers as an all sample. And then if we look at portraits, which some of you might be familiar with, which is our consumer segmentation report that we have in many markets, which is based on a little bit of demographics, but mainly wine drinking and wine buying behavior. And there as well, we see there's no difference between English speaking and Quebecois wine drinkers in Canada. Gender-wise, there's also no big difference. So English-speaking Canada is actually 50-50 in terms of male and female. There's a little bit of a skew towards males in Quebec, but not statistically significant. So no, that might just be the distribution of the sample that we have in this wave. And then the only difference that we see is that in Quebec, wine drinkers tend to be a little bit older. So 26% of regular wine drinkers in Quebec are aged 65 and over, compared to an all sample level of 20%, which is the kind of age distribution amongst regular wine drinkers in Canada, but also representative of the whole Canada adult population. When we look into more how Canada wine drinkers are engaging with the wine category, and we test these kind of involvement statements to see how wine drinkers are actually connecting with the category, we also see that there's fewer differences, as again, you see everything is dark blue, so no statistical difference. Apart from Quebecois wine drinkers, there's a lower proportion that would agree with the statement that generally speaking, wine is reasonably priced. And that might be just because Quebecois wine drinkers might see wine as a more discretionary or occasion-specific purchase. But apart from that, everything is very much the same and no huge differences. And if I had a quick look at a data table just a bit to dig a bit deeper, and there's no difference in spend either. So the spend levels, and this is recalled spend of consumers, so it tends to be a bit higher. Quebecois wine drinkers are sometimes spending a little bit more in the on-premise, but in general and in stores and the off-premise in general, there's no significant difference. If we look into a third trend, which is something that we have been actually watching for a while and increasingly so in the past year, obviously, the emerging e-commerce opportunity that we see globally, but in Canada in particular. So we had a look into e-commerce and online wine buying in many different markets. In October 2020 is when we ran this survey. And Canada especially has currently a smaller share of e-commerce users. So those are people that have used online wine buying channels in the past. However, the rate of consideration is very high compared to what we currently have. So there's a strong opportunity for e-commerce in Canada. And this is something that we see globally. So we see it in Mexico, the US, in Europe, also Australia, and China's a bit more mature already in that area, but also there's a huge opportunity just globally, which is not a surprise to anyone given the year that we had since 2020. And then we also had a look into current buyers. So those who are currently buying wine online, how have they changed their behavior during the pandemic? So if you have a look at the gray area, the gray line here that says no change, this is kind of what they have done. So those people that have not changed their online buying behavior in the past year. But we see that the majority of those who have bought wine online in the past 6 months are now buying wine more often. So these green arrows, so 58% in Canada, are actually saying they're buying wine more often now compared to last year, whereas only 17% are saying they're buying it a bit less often. So during the pandemic, we have seen a substantial acceleration towards wine buying in all markets that we've tested. A little bit slower in Germany, but quite big in all other markets. And then the fourth trend is this extension of wine o'clock, which I think we've all experienced over the past pandemic and lockdown periods. So we have seen in our data that wine drinking at home has kind of moved away from only the traditional drinking wine with dinner and a meal, but then also having wine just as a relaxing drink at the end of the day, just at home, doesn't have to be at the end of the day. We've also had a look into kind of afternoon lunch occasions, which we've seen have increased in April, but then slowed down a little bit. But what we see here is that just in August, we've seen an increase in consumers that say that they are drinking wine as a relaxing drink at the end of the day outside of meal occasions, more often than compared to pre-pandemic. So that's kind of interesting to see how occasions have changed for consumers when it comes to wine. And then the fifth, and I think one of the most interesting and also globally most interesting trend that we see in Canada is the opportunity of solar. So solar in our universe means sustainable, organic, low alcohol, and alternative wine. So quite a big word that we invented there. But we think there's a considerable opportunity in Canada. And when we look into just general attitudes towards sustainability, that's quite interesting. So we've asked this question about sustainability and attitudes in, I think it was 9 markets or 8 markets. You can see them all at the bottom of the slide there. And we have kind of created this global weighted score as a benchmark where we can compare each individual market to. So what we see here in Canada, the kind of level of concern of climate change has increased or is a bit higher than the global score. So consumers, wine drinkers, are worrying about climate change and are trying to minimize their impact. And also they try to buy more locally produced food and products. So there is this kind of increased level of concern and environmental consciousness, and consumers are aware that buying locally and minimizing the impact is a good idea. However, when we look at the bottom part of the slide, where we look into more actionable items, there's a little bit of a disconnect. So yes, consumers are aware that there's and are growingly concerned. However, there's a little bit of less desire to act on these concerns. So willingness to pay more for sustainably produced product is slightly lower than the global average. Also willingness to give up convenience for a sustainably produced product is also lower. So we see that there is this kind of, yes, we know we need to worry about things, but we're not quite ready to act on these causes, actually, when it compares to the global average. What this means for wine as well, we just had a look at how different claims that also include claims about the environment and organic and sulfate-free, sustainably produced, natural wine, how that impacts consumers' intent to purchase. So we have this bottle that you see here on the left is Farrington's Estate, which is a kind of brand we invented based on our office manager's name, who is now retired, who has his own wine now, at least in our surveys. And under this brand name, we have space to put some claims and credentials. So we test how more or less likely are consumers to buy when they see one of these claims on this bottle. So the line in the middle, or where all these bars are coming from, is the bottle without a claim. And then, for example, we see here for award-winning, 10% means that consumers are more likely to buy a bottle that has award-winning on it compared to a bottle without a claim. The award-winning is the most influential or the most impactful credential. It's not a surprise to anyone. Natural wine here has to be, that's a bit more difficult and needs to be taken with a grain of salt, because consumers, it's a bit more confusing for consumers. Natural wine scores so highly because consumers do not see the point how wine is not natural. So not what the industry considers a natural wine, but what consumers consider natural wine. We see there's a strong opportunity for environmentally friendly, sulfite-free, organic, and sustainably produced. They're all positively impacting the purchase intent of consumers, whilst vegan and vegetarian wine here on the right of the slide is having a more negative impact. Again, this is causing a bit of confusion amongst consumers because there's less knowledge of how wine is not vegan or vegetarian. But we see that these kind of sustainable and environment conscious claims are positively impacting consumers' choice of wine buying. And then the last trend that we wanted to share is this kind of shift to domestic wines that we have seen globally in the past year, and which makes sense from a consumer behavior point of view, when consumers in times of crisis are just going back to the familiar. So when we look into how what kind of origins are bought in Canada, we see that Canadian wine is actually bought more often compared to before the pandemic. And also in the second line of errors here shows the change in trust level of the different wine origins. So also consumers are buying more Canadian wine and they're also trusting it a little bit more. The story for German wines in this sense is that yes, consumers are buying it a little bit less frequently. However, trust has not changed, and the pandemic has not had an impact on the trust of Canadian wine drinkers of German wines. So that's the good news. And also the kind of decrease in purchase is in line with all other imported wines. So it's not that Germany is standing out in any way. It's just in line with all other origins. And I think that's a good message. And as long as the trust is not gone, I think there's a good opportunity. So just to summarize, what we've seen is that Canada is in the top 10 ranked wine markets, so number 10 in terms of attractiveness. English versus French speaking, the differences between wine drinkers are actually quite limited and not as strong as we thought. There's an emerging e-commerce opportunity in Canada and globally. Wine is being drunk outside of meal times now, and just more frequently without food. Solar is a growing opportunity in Canada and globally again, and this kind of shift to localism. And that's all I wanted to talk to you about today.
Thank you, Tina. I think this was very interesting. We had two questions.
Yes.
One was what solar means again.
Oh.
Just repeat that.
That's sustainable, organic, low alcohol, and alternative wine.
Okay, thank you. And the second one was if you have any data on the percentage of consumers who prefer vegan wines.
Yes, so what we have data on consumers that are aware, purchase, would consider, and have affinity. So have a kind of emotional connection to vegan wines. I'm happy to look that up and put that in the chat whilst the others are presenting.
Then there was a question what the ideal customer for German wine is. I think maybe Ted can answer this question afterwards. And what about import taxes? I think we'll go into this more technical and wine market information in the next two presentations. Okay.
I will stop sharing then.
Are there any additional questions? I don't think so. So then thank you, Tina, for the interesting presentation. And then I will like to ask Ted. Hello, Ted.
Hello.
To start with your presentation.
Thank you, Michael, and good afternoon or good morning to all of you, and thank you for your interest. I'll just get my screen up now. Okay, can everybody see that, Michael?
Yes, we can see it, yeah.
Okay, great. Well, first I thought I would go over the structure of the German wine market in Canada to help guide everyone on what is the best strategy for each individual winery in terms of approaching the market. So just get this going here. So, and in terms of an overview or panorama of the market for German wines in Canada, last year there were over 367,000 cases of wine sold, which represented just over $57 million in sales. And that is a 2.6% increase over the previous year. In addition, the average price per bottle for German wine came in at about $13, which is also an increase of approximately 6% over the previous year. What's interesting in terms of German wine sales in Canada is that they are concentrated mainly in 4 provinces. Those provinces being Ontario, Quebec, which is the French-speaking province, British Columbia, and Alberta. And they kind of follow the 80-20 rule. You have 84% of sales and volume in those 4 provinces and about 82% of the value of German wine sales. Also, those are the 4 largest provinces in terms of population, so it's not unusual to see this. Just looking at it more analytically by province, you see that in terms of volume sales, Ontario is by far the largest market, over 36% of sales, followed by Quebec with 28%, BC 9.8%, Alberta at 9%, and then continuing to the other provinces. What is actually quite interesting and something for the first time we're seeing is that has been in the last couple of years quite substantial growth in dollar sales in Quebec. And for the first time, it's very close and rivaling Ontario in terms of dollar sales of German wines. So that's something that we're watching very carefully. Now I'd like to go into each of the 4 key provinces and take a look at the situation and structure for German wines in each of these markets. So firstly, we'll start with Ontario because it is the most important market, 37% or so in volume. The sales increased by 1.3% last year. Most of the growth of sales was in the under $15 segment, grew over 4%. And that segment accounts for 90% of all German wine sales in value in the province. However, the luxury or ultra premium over 25 segment grew by 64.4%. It does represent still a small part of the market, but it's very positive to see that growth. As some of you may know, Canada has different monopolies. Each province has its own system. In Ontario, we have the LCBO, which is the Liquor Control Board of Ontario, It is a retail monopoly. Producers and wineries are required to have an agent representation, and Margaret will go into that more specifically for Ontario in her presentation. What is interesting is a new development, relatively new, is the opening of the grocery channel in Ontario. Grocery was permitted to sell wines as of October of 2019. There were different types of licenses, but now the system is more or less the same. There's about just over 150 grocery stores now that are authorized to sell imported wine, hence German wine too. The channel from zero now represents about 5% of wine sales. Certainly the pandemic with pantry loading helped on that. This is an opportunity for certain large wineries to enter this channel, but it is still have certain restrictions that I think are very important to highlight. One being that in order to be eligible for the grocery channel, your wine must already be listed in the LCBO on the regular list, or wines as they call it. And the retail price cannot be less than $10.95. So these are the rules that are in place currently. But again, I wanted to bring it forward because this is a channel that has potentially strong and continued growth. It did grow over 140% last year versus the wines and the LCBO growing about 4 or 5%. Okay, moving right along to the next market, that being Quebec. Again, it's Canada's most premium wine province. One of the reasons the prices are higher, and that what Tina mentioned earlier is of note, is because the markups are actually quite high in Quebec. So the average prices are higher than in Ontario. So you see that right there. Average price is $14.58 versus $12.98 in Ontario. There's a very good news story with Quebec in the sense that the entire category grew almost 13% in dollar sales, led by that mid segment, the $15 to $25 wines, which represents almost 12% of wine sales in the province. The luxury or over $25 segment also grew over 23%. So in Quebec, we have a similar system like in Ontario. There is a liquor board, the Société des Alcools de Québec, or the SAQ, a retail monopoly, again, with strict government control. All wineries should have an agent based in Quebec, preferably French speaking. And again, one of the interesting things about Quebec is, although it is starting to become less different than the rest of Canada, it still remains very European focused in terms of consumer preferences. As you can see, France and Italy dominate with 56% of the market, versus in Ontario, where France and Italy represent only a quarter of the market. But overall, what's positive is that Quebecers are discovering German wines, and we're seeing that in all price points in all segments. Now, moving all the way to the west, to the Pacific coast, we want to talk a little bit about British Columbia. What we're seeing for German wines in British Columbia, where there is a very strong local wine, domestic wine sales, over 50% of the market is domestic. We see that the mid segment, the $15 to $25 German wine segment, is the strongest in growth, almost 9% last year. And it also represents that segment at almost 38% of sales is the largest in Canada for that mid segment, as opposed to, say, where in Ontario, we had the under 15 representing 90%. What's interesting about British Columbia is that it used to be, like Ontario and Quebec, only a monopoly. But over time, there's been a liberalization of the rules. So you still have the government liquor stores, the BCLS, but now you also have private wine shops, small chains, and so forth that also compete with the government monopoly. However, you should note that the government liquor stores still have the dominant position in terms of imported wine sales with a 40% market share. But agents, so your representative in that market, has the option to work both with the government liquor stores or with the independent or private retailers, as well as the hospitality on-premise sector. And then finally, Alberta, which is the exception. It is the privatized market, representing about 9% of German wine sales. Here we see that almost 80% of all German wine sales are in that under $15 segment. The good news is after many years of decline, it's stabilized last year. So it's plus 0.2%. However, we do need to see some growth in those higher segments in order to really build the category in Alberta. So again, what's interesting about Alberta is that it doesn't actually have a retail liquor board. It has an agency called Alcohol, Gaming, Liquor, and Cannabis, which is more of a licensing agency. And it does regulate, but it is not the retailer. They operate under contract a central warehouse where all the wines come in and then are purchased by the private retailers. In this market, there's two ways to establish representation. You have an agent who acts either under a buy-sell agreement or with a commission agreement, which is typical to what you see in the other provinces. The concern about Alberta is that it is quite a cyclical market. The economy is much tied to the oil and gas industry, so the fortunes of that industry also affect the economy quite significantly. So currently you're seeing higher unemployment, the closures due to COVID-19, and also the fact that there is a lot of discounting through the supermarkets. However, it is, again, our fourth most important market. So after seeing that panorama of how the German wine sales are structured in Canada, I thought it'd be important just to showcase to you briefly some of the activities that Wines of Germany, the Canadian office, conducts on your behalf. So we focus on certain provinces based on the structure of the market. However, we do certain items and certain activities nationally in order to have a presence in the other provinces too. So activities such as information office, where we work closely with trade and press from across Canada to raise awareness and build knowledge of German wines. We have certain types of promotions such as 31 Days German Riesling promotion, which is run nationally. It is an on-premise promotion that we're adapting to the current situation. However, it is available and runs across the country, as well as certain activities such as a trade newsletter and our social and digital media campaign, which is again run nationally, mainly on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter. And I just wanted to highlight just a couple of key activities in certain markets. Ontario being our biggest market, we work very closely with the LCBO. We aim each year to do one major promotion with the liquor board. We have one scheduled for July this year. In Quebec, the same goes for there too. We have one scheduled in June. And in British Columbia, we have the option of working with the government liquor stores or with some of the private retailers. And we're currently looking at what's the best option for us right now in that market. In terms of education activities, we run trade days for the key trade. We're running one in Montreal and in Vancouver this year, as well as supporting a climate change conference that will be national, digital, but based in Montreal. And in some years, we look at certain focus markets where there's an interest from the monopoly to work with us, such as Nova Scotia, that we're looking to do a campaign with the liquor board there. Now, there is a service that we've just negotiated that I wanted sort of hot off the press to bring forward to you, particularly for wineries that are not in the market and are thinking, how can we get into this huge country? It's like twice the size of all of Scandinavia. So we've partnered with Wineline, which is the largest wine review site in Canada with over 1 million unique visitors annually. And they bring together the top wine critics, particularly from Ontario and Quebec, but also from Western Canada, to help consumers make decisions on purchasing wine. So together with them, we've created a dating service that helps match agents with wineries that are not yet in market. The way it works is that as a winery, you would upload and send samples to Wineline for evaluation by their panel of critics, who would then assess and give feedback on your wines. Then they would be posted to a site where agents from across the country could come and take a look and then decide whether they'd like to work with you and then contact you directly. It will launch actually on April 1st, so you're getting sort of a heads up on it. And we've negotiated a special deal for wineries with this code, DWI 2021. And that will operate for the 3 months, for the first 3 months. And I think it'll be an interesting way to help, again, wineries that are not in the market to build a profile. And then finally, just to sort of sum up my discussion in terms of how to tackle the market and what strategy to have for the market. So firstly, I would suggest that you target a particular province. You look at, where it makes most sense for you. Secondly, it would be to partner with a local agent who would be your face, your representative in that market. The key is collaboration in terms of working with your agent, working with us at Wines of Germany, Canada, in terms of leveraging some of the activities that we can offer you. And then finally, I really think that social media is a key way to build awareness of your brand, of your winery in Canada, because it's so well accepted in Canada. To build an awareness through posting, through stories, through photos, people will get to know your winery even before you're in the market, and working with your agent, building that awareness. But that, however, means that you need to have content in English or in French if you're working in Quebec. But I think this is a good way to start to leverage yourself into the market and to use over and above the other tools that are available through promotions and PR. Okay, I think that's my my piece.
Okay, thank you, Ted. We had quite a few questions. Let me just go through here. Do e-commerce wines have to go through the SAQ? Was the question here.
Yeah, the SAQ does operate. It's an e-com channel, and it has grown exponentially in the last year, well, since the pandemic, and it will continue to grow. So yes, the SAQ does operate an e-com channel, absolutely.
And then we had another question regarding the Ontario market. If you see the opportunity of further opening the grocery channel for wines under or that are not general list wines over 10.95.
Yeah, that's a good question. The industry and the grocers are lobbying for more openness in this channel. There have been some issues in stocking the groceries with the wines that are eligible. So I think this is something to watch over time. But again, currently it is quite a limited channel, but it's been so popular that there is growing pressure to make it more, to liberalize it further.
And then the next question was if Wines of Germany is planning to support alcohol-free wines, as you mentioned an example that Lights does very well with alcohol-free wines. Maybe I can go a little bit into this. I think in general, we see an increasing demand of low alcohol wines all over the world, especially in the English-speaking countries. This is definitely a topic that we will communicate more in the future, and we may as well include here or there an alcohol-free wine, but so far this is not one of our main communication topics. And then there was a question if you could just go into a little bit more detail about the Market Matcher program. If you can tell us a little bit more about that, how this is going to work.
Sorry, about which?
The Market Matcher program. I think
yes.
With Wine Align.
That's right. Yeah. So the idea there is that you would be contacting through the Wine Align website. You would be able to send your wines to them, send samples to them for consideration and review by their panel of experts. So you would arrange. They would help you arrange the samples to come to them. They would be tasted by the panel of journalists and then assessed and given. I'm not sure if it will be marks, but there'll be an assessment of them. And then this will be posted, if you desire, onto their site where agents from across the country can consult them. Both information about your winery, but also how your wines were assessed. And then the agents can contact you directly. So what it does is it gives you what we call sort of third-party accolades from recognized journalists and wine critics from Canada. before you're even in the market. So it gives you that one step that you wouldn't have before you're listed. So, so I think it'll be quite beneficial, again, for wineries that are new to market.
Thank you. The next question is about the grape varieties. Are there specific grape varieties Canadians are looking for? Is it just Riesling?
Oh, that's a good question. No, I mean, Riesling is certainly one of the ones that it's the destination grape for Germany. However, in terms of top selling white wines, I mean, it's ones that not, Pinot Blanc, Pinot Gris are also very good. I mean, Chardonnay, Sauvignon Blanc are the top two, but the other Pinots I think have some potential. Certainly Pinot Noir also from Germany would be the most, if we were talking outside of Riesling, those would have the most potential.
I think that we'll just do the last two questions so we can continue. How can one become an agent in Canada?
Become an agent?
Yeah. What do you have to do?
Each province there, you would have to apply to each province has its own sort of alcohol and gaming commission, and there's an application process that you can go through. And I can certainly, if the questioner wants to know more detail, I can provide it. But it's regulated by each province. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. And the question was when the 31 days of German Riesling take place. So that's in July, so the whole month of July.
Yes.
And what about sweet Riesling?
About what, sorry?
About sweet Riesling.
Sweet Riesling, yes. I would say it's a niche in this market. You have to remember that we also produce in Canada ice wine, and that kind of takes that sort of consumer demand. So it is really, really a very niche product, yes.
Okay, so if there are any additional questions, I think we can do them at the end. So far, I don't see any more in the chat. But if anything should come up, then we'll do another Q&A session after Margaret. So thank you, Ted.
Thank you.
And in general, I mean, you can always contact Ted in Canada if you have any questions about the market, if you're looking for representation, or if you have any other questions about the activities. So please feel free to contact Ted or me at the DWI. So then last but not least, we have Margaret Hobbs, who's the managing partner of Buyer and Sellers, which is a wine agency based in Ontario with big experience in many channels of the trade in Canada, especially in Ontario, also working as an agent. So we look forward to your insights about the Ontario market.
Great, thanks, Michael. I'm happy to be here to tell everybody about the wonderful world of selling wine in Ontario. It's a complicated subject matter. I've tried to narrow this down to topics and ideas and information that will be most helpful to the vast majority of you, but it is a very big topic. We have a longer presentation that goes into much more detail about the specific channels and some of the ins and outs of working here that Michael can share with you tomorrow when he shares all of the presentations. So for now, sorry, you can see my screen, right? There we are.
Yes, okay. We can see your screen.
So these are the questions I'm hoping I can answer for you today. How and where can you sell your wines here? And what are the differences between the different sales channels? How do LCBO tenders, also known as product calls, work? And as Ted mentioned, the Liquor Control Board of Ontario has the retail monopoly here. So we're speaking specifically about Ontario. I'm going to talk a little bit about the on-trade and some beverage regulations and changes to those happening here. A little bit about importation and pricing, as well as the LCBO laboratory and label requirements. And then lastly, how do you find and choose an agent? Imported wine, there are two main divisions within the LCBO for the importation, as well as the distribution and sale of imported wines. I'm not talking about grocery because, as Ted mentioned, That's sort of a separate section after you've already been listed in the wines category, which I'm referring to here as general list. It's the old name, but there is the retail division and the specialty services division. So I'm going to start by explaining a little bit about the retail division. I have to minimize this screen if I can. 1 second. So there are four main channels, four main programs within LCBO retail: general list, vintages, classics, and destination collection. And you can see they share something in common, that wines listed here are chosen by tender. And what that means is that there is an LCBO buyer or a group of buyers that decides what gets purchased and what is available for sale. The selection criteria used differs depending on the program. So you can see price matters. General list wines, the average price of a wine on the shelf in LCBO stores is under 10 Canadian dollars. Vintages is the fine wine division of LCBO retail, and those prices average $20 to $40. Classics is the iconic wines that are featured there. Typically, they sell for over $50. And then the destination collection is the newest program in this channel, and it is for wines that don't often fit in the other three, and the price range can be broader. A&P, so advertising, promotion dollars, and packaging are really important for general list. These are wines that are sitting on the shelf and against all the other products from around the world. So that is paramount for general list tenders and decision criteria. And while those can be important as well for the other programs, really it is scores that matter. So as Ted mentioned, third-party scores, typically by internationally recognized publications or critics, especially North American ones. And you can see here, to be even considered for a listing in classics, you normally need to have at least 93 points. General list, if you win a general list tender, this is a permanent listing, so you can stay on the shelves in LCBO stores, provided you meet or exceed the sales target that the LCBO sets. All other listings are one-time purchases, and the volumes vary quite materially, as you can see. And another important distinction is, where can people buy these wines? So general list is a mainly in-store experience. There are over 660 stores scattered around the province. And if you are super successful in this program, you could have your wine in every single one of them. Similarly, vintages is primarily an in-store shopping channel. And it is a store within a store. So about half, you can see here, about half of the LCBO retail shops have a section within them where these fine wines that come and go regularly can be purchased. We've talked about online and the growth happening there, and that's certainly a trend we're seeing, but historically these have been primarily in-store experiences, whereas classics classics wines are primarily purchased by a catalog that is distributed to a very limited group of wine collectors and connoisseurs, given the price point and the niche nature and the iconic nature of most of these wines. And then the primary channel for destination collection is online. These are online exclusives, with the exception of this one store that I've listed here. And the destination collection has developed what are called boutique stores. And these are, there's a dozen or so stores around the province that have a country or region focus. And these stores offer more wines and beer and spirits from that country or region than any other location in the province. There is one German wine store. It's located in Waterloo, about an hour west of Toronto. And it is reported by the LCBO that the selection of wine and beer and spirits from Germany at this location rivals any other in the world outside of Germany. So that's a really brief overview of the retail program. And one important reminder, these decisions for listing are all made by a buyer through tender. So we're going to talk a little bit about tenders. There is an upcoming generalist tender for German wines that closes in June. This is often what the tenders look like. The buyers will outline the parameters, including the specifications. So in this case, they are looking to refresh the category. So they want clean and easy to understand packages, modern styles, and ideally they're looking for a wine that is under $15. They're trying to bring new buyers to the German wine category. And over here, you can see most tenders run through the LCBO involve a three-step process, an application, which doesn't cost you anything. Your agent will do that on your behalf. If you are successful to get into the tasting stage, you then need to send a sample to your agent for them to submit to LCBO head office. And then there is a tasting and a decision made. So on the surface, it looks fairly simple. And it certainly looks cost effective because there isn't a cost to you to apply. But it's really, really important for everybody to understand that the general list or the wines division at LCBO is the most competitive category here. Wines here have large scale sales and distribution potential. To get a shelf price, sorry, I really do need to minimize this if I can. There we go. I couldn't see all my screens. To get a shelf price of $15 Canadian, which is what the generalist tender is looking for, you need to have a net export price of approximately €2.60 or less. So this clearly isn't a channel that is available for everyone. These are larger produced, lower priced wines. You also need to be prepared to spend approximately 20,000 Canadian dollars or more to launch the brand, as well as ongoing marketing and merchandising support. The LCBO sets sales targets for every wine in the general list. If you are a $15 German Riesling, that sales target is approximately 1,500 cases in a 12-month period. And if you do not meet that, you are at risk for a delist. So the message here is that this is highly competitive. Price, package, and promotion are paramount. It's very difficult to win a listing, and it can be relatively easy to lose one, and all that money invested can be lost. So this is not for the faint of heart. There is no vintages tender for German wines at the moment, but there is a classics call. Looks slightly different, but works in a similar way to the generalist tender. The buyer will outline what they're looking for. And in this case, it's reds or whites, any grape variety. And again, this idea that they are high scorers or well-established, typically iconic brands. And again, it is a three-step process. So that, in a nutshell, and hopefully in time, is an overview of the retail system. We're now going to move to the specialty services, the other main division within the LCBO. And I thought I would compare and contrast the retail program that we just spoke about with the main program that happens under specialty services, which is the consignment warehouse program. And you can see here that instead of decisions being made by the LCBO buyer, decisions for what to include in a portfolio and what to purchase is made by the agent. And not just by any agent, they must be qualified to work in the consignment program. This is a performance-based system. Agents have to show and prove and meet certain criteria to join the program, and they have to continue to meet rather stringent sales turnover criteria in order to grow, as well as to even maintain their spot there. Order size is different. Typically with consignment orders, the minimum order size is 15 cases. You won't normally see much more than a half pallet or a pallet in any given order. Where these wines can be purchased differs. Retail wines can be purchased on lcbo.com online or in LCBO shops. And consignment wines can only be purchased through an agent directly or through their website. And then the target market is slightly different as well. Historically, the retail channel is really geared for consumers, whereas historically the consignment program has been the main supply channel for restaurants in Ontario. And it's not that restaurants, you can see they can purchase from any of the retail programs, but they like working with consignment agents. They get service, consignment agents will taste with them and deliver. And also they offer a selection of wine that is different than what you see on the shelves in the store. So it gives them a bit of a unique opportunity to find wines that work with their menu and are slightly different. I imagine in Germany, you have a similar expression here that within every dark cloud, there is a silver lining. And there have been a few silver linings that have come out of the past year. And one is in this little box right here. Historically, private consumers knew nothing about consignment wines. Very few knew anything about this program, that they could buy these wines. And with stay-at-home orders and lockdown orders and from home orders and people looking for a doorstep delivery, consumers started to understand that they could buy these wines, these consignment wines that they thought were only available through restaurants, and they can have them delivered to their door. So this is a smaller check mark because it is a smaller portion of what consignment agents have typically focused on, but it is growing. And it, I believe, is an opportunity for the German wine category because Ted talked about, the sales volumes, 367,000 cases sold in Canada last year. I believe that was in Canada. And the vast majority of that in terms of volume and revenue would be driven by the retail channel. But the breadth of selection, the number of SKUs, is likely driven by consignment. So smaller lots, but of more a greater variety of wine. And so this presents an opportunity for wineries, especially small and medium wineries, size wineries looking to get into the market. Silver linings. There are a few. The liquor laws in Ontario date to Prohibition, 1917 or something. And I can honestly say that I have been in the business for almost 25 years, and I have seen more progressive and business enhancing changes to the liquor laws in the past year than I have seen in all of my experience working in this industry. And there are a few of them. So historically, consignment agents had to sell by the full case lot. So that meant if I imported Rheingau Riesling in a case of 12 bottles, I had to sell a full case of 12 bottles to a restaurant or to a private consumer. And that was a barrier to a lot of private consumers, even if they knew about consignment wines, to purchase. So in an effort to help consignment agents survive the past year, the LCBO has now allowed them to offer mixed cases, which is good news, again, because it's more experimentation, and hopefully we can get more consumers, private consumers, buying wines from these sources and a greater breadth of product. Another change that has happened is that restaurants that are licensed to sell beverage alcohol in Ontario are now able to deliver wine and beer and spirits with their takeout food orders. So that was something that was implemented quite early on last spring as restaurants were closed for indoor dining and struggling to survive. And this is now a permanent change to our liquor laws. And it's really changing the competitive landscape here. Restaurants are now operating like small retail shops, and it's putting some pressure on the LCBO and providing greater opportunity and selection to consumers. Lastly, there is a proposed change to the consignment program. If you remember, I said that this is a performance or has been a performance-based program. And one of the changes that we are hoping will be introduced in July is that requirement will be removed. So agents that want to get into wine importation representation will not need to qualify. And if there are more agents working in this business, there may be greater opportunities for you to find a partner to export your wines here. Importation and pricing. So LCBO is the only authorized importer of beverage alcohol into the province, and they set the price of imported wine sold here, which includes a 71.5% markup, and that markup is charged after foreign exchange, after duty, after excise, and after freight. So the message here is that wines are expensive. I know they're less expensive here in Ontario than they are in Quebec, but they are still quite expensive. And to give you an example, a German wine sitting on the shelf here at about 25 Canadian dollars needs to have a net export price of about €5.50, which is the equivalent of just over $8 Canadian. So you're going to get $8 Canadian for that wine, and it's going to sell here for about $25. I don't know how I'm doing for time. Michael, am I okay? We are now at 11 o'clock.
Yeah, no, that's fine. I mean, maybe 5 more minutes. 10 minutes.
5 more minutes. Yep. I'm
Yeah.
sorry. I'll be quick.
No, that's fine.
Okay, good. I think I can speed this up. So all the wines that come into Ontario must be approved by the lab. There is a lab fee that is approximately 25 Canadian dollars for every SKU. So that's every vintage of every wine, every 12 months. There is an exception for small orders. It's important for you to know that the chemical analysis and packaging standards here are very strict, and there are often penalties for non-compliance. And just to give you an example, the allergen declaration here, and this is something that's coming into effect in July, it must appear in a box. It must have a white background. The French and English declarations need to be on different sizes, and the LCBO dictates how large the O must be on your label. So I bring that up to let you know that when you look into exporting to Canada and to Ontario in particular, make sure that your agent is paying attention to these details on your behalf. And it's important that you know the added costs and headaches of getting your wines approved for sale here. Okay, choosing an agent. So the first question is, what distribution channel does an agent focus on? We've seen there's quite a difference between retail and specialty services. Normally, agents focus on the general list, the wines category, or on the consignment warehouse. It's hard to find an agent that does both really well. Most agents will submit to vintages and classics. So that's an important question. If you are better suited to the general list, you should look for a generalist agent. Size does matter. You do want, sometimes you want a small agency that doesn't have competing wines from Germany that can focus on yours. Sometimes you want somebody that has breadth of sales team and a strong reputation with the LCBO buyers and products already in the general list. What's their track record of success? Have they faced D-lists? Are they growing their consignment space? I would say, reiterate Ted's message that social media and digital marketing is increasingly important here. So you would want an agent that has an active website and is active on some of the social media platforms, and testimonials from existing suppliers can be helpful. And lastly, finding an agent. So most of the established and professional agents in Ontario are members of the Importers Association, which is called Drinks Ontario. You can have your winery posted on the members only site, indicating you're looking for an agent. You can also browse through the members' profiles to see if there's one that might look like they could work well with you. Historically, most Ontario agents have gone to Provine, so nothing like a face-to-face meeting. You can ask for referrals from any of your colleagues or competitors that are friendly that you know are working in Ontario, and also ask Ted. Ted is a great resource. He is a friend and well-known by all the agents here, and he might know of agents that are looking to expand their German wine portfolio. So thank you very much. Are there any questions?
Thank you, Margaret. That was very interesting, and I think you showed quite well that there are quite a few challenges, but also new opportunities by the recent changes and slight liberalizations in the market. We had quite a few questions. The one was, do you have to have an agent in order to sign up for the tenders?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Technically, you do not. The tenders are available online. There is, I will share with everybody tomorrow, an LCBO website. If you want to spend hours, you can learn about all these various programs and you can see the tenders posted. You could sign up to go online, but sorry, I'm going to backtrack. It's really better to have an agent because the program, the online application program you need to apply for, I don't know, Ted, maybe you could confirm. I don't know that you need to be an agent to get that access, but you're better to have an agent. Yes.
Okay. Are there some changes in the regulations that are not intended to be permanent changes? For example, consignment, general mixed cases.
So every change that has come into place right now has been made permanent. The bottle shops was a temporary thing and it's been passed into law. The consignment mixed cases has been approved full-time by the consignment people. The only thing that isn't confirmed definitely are those changes I mentioned that hopefully will come into effect July 1st, but they've been announced and we feel that it's just hopefully a rubber stamp by LCBO Legal. So the changes are permanent, which is really exciting for us in the business and I think for you trying to get into this market.
Yeah. And then for specialty services, where can we get a list of qualified consignment agents?
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. I will ask if the specialty services department provides contacts. There are something like 400 registered agents, but I believe there's somewhere about 150 that are qualified for the consignment program. Again, the Drinks Ontario website, you can look through that, but it's a lot of digging to understand what channel each of those might be in. And the Alcohol and Gaming Commission, which is the regulatory body, has a list of all agents, but they do not let you know if they are in consignment or otherwise. So I will ask, and I'll let you know, Michael, before tomorrow, whether the LCBO, the Specialty Services Department, would share a list of agents.
Yeah, I saw the question came from Nicolas Blanchard. So maybe, Nicolas, you can reach out to Ted, and then you can, Margaret, you can send the information to Ted, and then he can forward it to.
Sure, perfect.
I think. Oh, let me see. Is there a way that you can, how you can see how an agent performs in the market?
No, not really. The consignment area in particular is quite private. The sales of a consignment agent are deemed to be theirs. In the general list, it's a bit easier. You could see what brands an agency has, and you can get some sense of how they're performing. But no, these are all, for the most part, privately owned companies, and those records are not made public. Yeah,
so maybe an opportunity would be if you know any, or if you see that they have other German producers, to talk to the producer how satisfied they are with their work, but in general, or to reach out to Ted.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Ted
give some background info. Yeah. But in general, yeah, that's a difficult question.
Yeah, if I can just add in, yes, you know, typically that information is private, but there is, you know, the data we receive in terms of the general list and vintages releases, we can see which agents are behind them. So we have some insight on that. Also looking at the portfolio of the brand, of the agents, who they're representing. Whenever a winery asks me about, you know, an agent, I'd say talk to the producers they're already representing to get a sense of, you know, how they feel, how it's been going for them and so forth. And one thing I always recommend to wineries is that, you know, because of the monopoly system, it takes some time for an agent to get going. I mean, sometimes an order might come just like that, but other times it takes a while. So you need to have some patience and work really, as I said earlier, as in a partnership and a collaboration, working together to see what's the best way to build the business and give it a little bit of time to, you know, to develop. Yeah.
Okay. I can't see any additional questions. So if you have any, just type them in the chat in the next few minutes. I would like to thank everybody to share your knowledge about the market. And I think this was very interesting for producers who are already in the market to get some up-to-date information, especially from Tina, and also for the producers who are new to the market or are planning to enter the market, to get the information from Margaret and Ted. I would like to point out two more things. One is the Sprechtag, that next week on Thursday. If you still have any questions, you can book a 15-minute meeting with Ted, where you can ask all your questions and discuss the market. But nevertheless, you can also reach out to Ted at any time if you should have any questions. And our next Marktinfo seminar will be on the 29th of April about Russia at 11 a.m. So you will get all the information and the link via email. So let me just see if we have any additional questions.
I saw one question about non-alcoholic. Are the regulations for non-alcoholic wine the same?
Yeah.
And I think I can answer that. The answer is no. The LCBO has been branching into non-alcoholic wine, but primarily that's been a grocery channel listing, and so it works completely different and it's not regulated in the same way.
Okay.
Is that fair, Ted? Fair?
Yeah, yeah, and even the grocers merchandise them still separately, so they're merchandised in a totally different section from the alcoholic wines. Yeah.
Right. So thanks a lot for taking your time, and yeah, we look forward to seeing you hopefully soon live again. So then have a nice rest of the week, and thanks everybody for joining us. And if you have any questions afterwards, just send us an email and we'll get back to you. And we will share, as I mentioned, all the presentations tomorrow, so you can just read them and digest everything that we went through in the last hour. So thanks a lot, and have a nice day, and goodbye.
Thanks. Bye.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.